Greetings, Earthlings, and welcome back to Podcastage. Today I am back with a review of the Behringer D2 Podcast Pro. Full disclosure, I bought this with my own money. It costs about $130. All of my recording settings will be listed in the doobly-doo as well as the lower third. And now let's talk about what comes in the box. Trying to take it easy. I have a box throwing injury. What a shocker. You get the microphone, a windscreen, a 5/8 to 3/8 inch mic stand adapter, a shock mount which has 5/8 and 3/8 inch threading, a desktop tripod, a 2-meter USB-C to USB-A cable, and a tiny bit of documentation. Then as far as the build quality, I would say that this feels fine. It has an all-metal body. There is a metal mesh grille which has a tiny bit of give to it. The ribbing underneath the foam is made of plastic. The yoke mount and the tension screws are made out of metal. On the side, you have a microphone mute button, which will turn the light red. You also have a volume control for the headphone playback. On the back, you have a USB-C port to connect this to your device, an XLR port to connect this to your preamp or interface, a 3.5mm headphone jack for computer playback and zero latency monitoring. I want to include a disclosure here. The headphone jack only works when it is being used in USB mode. When you are just using this over XLR, the headphone jack doesn't work. And if you care or not, this microphone is made in China. I'm not going to read all of the specs to you, but I will have what I could find up on screen in case you want to pause and take a closer look, and I also have the specs that I could find listed in the description down below. Now I'm spinning around the D2 to 90 degrees to show you the off-axis rejection and coloration. Continuing around to 180 degrees, this is the rear. Continuing around to the second 90-degree angle, here we are, and then rotating and ending at the front of the microphone. Now let's see how the D2 handles plosive rejection. Please provide pizza pronto, pals. Please prepare pizza pronto, please, pals. Please poo. I've officially lost my mind. Now I am right on top of the D2 to exaggerate the proximity effect, and here is how it's sounding. Now I'm 3 inches off of the microphone with it pointed at the corner of my mouth, and here's how it sounds. Now about 1 foot away from the D2, about 2 feet away from the D2, and about 4 feet away from the Behringer D2. Now I am typing on a keyboard with Gatoron blue switches to see how much of my voice versus how much of the keyboard it picks up. And for the gamers, now I am typing on the SAD W and spacebar keys. Now here is how the D2 sounds about 3 inches away from my mouth in a relatively well-treated room. And now here is how the D2 sounds about 3 inches away from my mouth in a completely untreated room. I am also annoying and I want to be thorough, so I am going to tap on the microphone to see if there are any kind of resonant frequencies. Now I want to see how effective the provided shock mount is, so I'll start by tapping on my desk to see how much of that noise it can reject. And then I will tap on the boom arm. Now let's see how the mute function is engaged, so I will keep switch it off, I will switch it back off, and that is how the mute function is engaged and disengaged. Now I want to do a quick comparison between the USB and the XLR output to see if there's any difference in tone. So first up, I have the USB running directly into my computer, 24-bit, 48 kilohertz, input level set at about 53%, and here is how it's sounding. And now I am on the XLR output. I'm running directly into the Focusrite 18i 22nd Gen. Gain is set at about 430, again recording 2448, and here is how it sounds over this output. Back again on the USB for another sample so you can hear how it sounds. This is direct to my computer, no processing over USB. And now I have jumped over to XLR. Here is how it sounds running through my standard audio interface. No processing, same recording settings, same everything. Level matched as close as I possibly can in the analog realm. I will verify levels in post, and that is enough of a sample. I just inadvertently stumbled upon this, but if you are using the mic in USB and you can touch the XLR pins, it becomes a radio. Very cool. That's something that you know now. Now, like I always do, I'm going to do a quick spoken word comparison between the microphone that we're reviewing and a bunch of other microphones that are available so we can hear how this stacks up against the competition and understand its placement within the microphone market. I know, very economic sounding. Starting on the Behringer D2, I am 3 inches off. My input level is set at 53%, recording 24-bit, 48 kilohertz. Let's jump to the first mic. First up, I'm on the older brother to the Behringer D2, the SM7b. I am 3 inches off, running directly into the 18i 22nd gen. Gain is set at about 430 or 445, recording 24-bit, 48 kilohertz. This microphone costs about $25, and here is how this sounds compared to the D2. Back again on the D2 to function as a palate cleanser. Here is how it sounds. Let's go to the next mic. Now onto the Samson Q2u, which is another XLR and USB dynamic microphone. I'm 3 inches off. My input level is set at 53%, recording 16-bit, 48 kilohertz. This microphone costs about $70, I believe, and here is how this sounds compared to the D2. Here I am cleaning out your ear holes again. This is the Behringer D2. Nothing has changed. Let's hear another microphone. Now onto the Fifine K688. Again, I am 3 inches off. My input level is set at 87%, recording 16-bit, 48 kilohertz, because that's the max this records at. This microphone costs between $70 and $80, and here is how Fifine's offering sounds compared to the Behringer. All right, we're back on the D2 again. No big surprise there. That is enough talking to give you an idea of how it sounds. Let's hear the next one. Next up, I'm on the Shure SM58, which is one of the most popular handheld microphones. Again, running into the 18i20, gain still set 430, 445. This microphone costs about $100, and here's how it sounds compared to the D2. Let's go back and do a whole bunch more. All right, this is the D2, and this is also the midpoint palate cleanser. That's enough talking. That's the D2. Let's hear the next microphone. Next up, I'm on the SE Electronics V7, 3 inches off, with my gain still set at about 430 or 445 on the 18i20. This microphone costs about $100. Also, make sure to check the lower third and see how much I boost each of these mics in post, but that is enough of a sample. Let's go back to the D2 and do some more. Here I am back on the Behringer again. Here is how it sounds. Same distance, same input level setting. Let's hear some more mics. Next up, I am on the Earthworks SR117, which is a handheld condenser. I'm 3 inches off. My gain is set at about 3 o'clock. This mic costs about $200. The reason I'm including this is it's a very flat microphone, so this will allow us to hear what kind of tone the D2 really has. That's enough of a sample. Let's go back to the Behringer and do some more comparisons. We have a handful more to go, so here is another palate cleanser on the D2, blah, 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 blah. Let's go to the next one. Next up, I'm on the Rode Podmic USB, which is another XLR and USB dynamic microphone. I'm 3 inches off. My input level is set at 31.5% or 45 dB, recording 24-bit, 48 kilohertz. All of the processing for this is turned off, and this microphone costs about $200. There you go, that's the Podmic USB against the K688. Back on the D2 for your penultimate palate cleanser. Here is how it's sounding. Let's go to the second to last microphone. Next up, I'm on the Shure SM7b with the EQ mode set to neutral. I am 3 inches off. The gain on the 18i20 was increased to 100%. This microphone costs about $400, so quite a bit more than the D2, and here is how this sounds compared to the Behringer. Let's go back and do one final comparison. And here is the final palette cleanser on the D2, which means we have one more microphone to go to, and you know what it's going to be, so let's jump to that mic right now. I am on the Neumann U87 Ai. I am 3 inches off. Cardioid polar pattern, no pad, no filters. Gain on the 18i20 is set at 11 o'clock. This microphone costs about $3,700. So this is absolutely a fair comparison between a USB dynamic and a $3,700 multi-pattern studio condenser microphone. That's enough of comparisons. Let's go to the music test. Behringer has put out the Podcast Pro. I must review it, so I've sold my soul. That's not totally true. The little bit of my soul that's left after making 700 microphone YouTube videos, that's still intact. And going forward, I will do nothing but sing brand names. That's a lie. Let's move on. Call me crazy, but I'm starting to believe that putting out a good-sounding $100-ish broadcast-style dynamic mic is either really, really difficult or impossible. But now let's talk about the pros, and number one for me is the background noise rejection on this thing. I found the rejection at 90 and 180 degrees to be really darn respectable. I also like that they have a mute button, which is effective, and it doesn't have a tremendous amount of noise when you engage and disengage. I also love that you have XLR and USB output, which you can use simultaneously. And the plosive rejection on this thing isn't the best, but it does sound like there's quite an aggressive high-pass filter on the audio at all times, and that really lessens the impact of plosives, because you don't have all that low-end energy. Then as far as cons, first up for me is the lack of shock rejection. If you're not using the provided shock mount, it is abysmal and it'll pick up every single bump of your desk. But even if you're using the provided shock mount, it doesn't do the best job at rejecting bumps of your boom arm. So if you move it around a lot or you bump the springs on your boom arm, that is going to make it into the microphone. Piggybacking off of that, the microphone isn't the worst at this, but it does have a little bit of resonance and it sounds a little hollow. So if you handhold your microphone a lot when you're moving it around, that is also going to make it into the recording. The next con has to do with the sound of the microphone. I just think they rolled off a bit too much in the lower frequencies. I would prefer to have all those bass frequencies still there and then be able to roll it off in post where I want it, as opposed to having this really aggressive roll-off that is burnt into the audio. Then we have some bad wiring. If you touch the XLR pins in USB mode, you get a radio. And the last con is more of an FYI. The audio input does go up to 24-bit 96 kilohertz, but the output is limited to 16-bit 48 kilohertz. I don't think that's the biggest deal, but I needed to point that out because you won't be able to monitor at the recording settings that you actually record at, which is just an interesting choice. And now, what are my overall thoughts and opinions of the Behringer D2? As far as the overall sound, I would say the low frequencies are rolled off pretty aggressively. Then we get a very mid-focus sound, a bit of a mid-push, and then the upper frequencies are kind of tame. It doesn't have much in terms of air frequencies or super detailed sound. It has a kind of tame upper frequency range. On the electric guitar, I didn't love it. There's just not as much bass as I want. I want a bit more support out of it. On the acoustic guitar, it's a very similar story. It just doesn't have enough support in the lower frequencies, and it also doesn't have that treble and air that I like for an acoustic instrument, so it sounds a little bit dull and not lively or exciting. For singing, I think it's fine because that low frequency roll off I think works quite well here. You do still get that mid-focus sound and then a softer top end. It's not that aggressive, it's not overly bright. And finally, for spoken word, I want more in the low end. I want more support, but you're getting that roll off, that mid-focus sound, that mid-push, and then that tamer top end that isn't overly detailed. And to wrap up, would I recommend the Behringer D2 Podcast Pro? Not really. The reason I'm saying that is this sells for a price tag of $130, and to me, that doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. I thought that every other microphone that I compared it against sounded better, and a couple of those were also XLR USB dynamic mics that are $50 cheaper. Yes, the more affordable USB mics are limited on the conversion side to 16-bit, but I would always prefer to record a microphone I like the sound of at a lower bit depth as opposed to recording a microphone that I don't like the sound of at a higher bit depth. Then we get to the XLR microphones, and again, I thought every mic that I compared against the D2 sounded better, and in that lot is the SM8500, which costs $25. You could throw in the UM2 interface for $40, and then all the accessories that are needed as well, and you would still be under $100, as opposed to $130 for the D2, and in my opinion, you'd be getting a much better sounding recording, and you'd be much better off going that route, and that is why I'm not recommending the D2.